The Xiaomi Redmi 4 Prime is so good, and it's actually quite a nice coincidence because my last video was about 5 great phones that left me cold. And this is the best example of being the complete opposite, because not that I had no expectations at all about this phone, but I did not expect it to be that good. And that's why I'm super happy that Trading Shenzhen gave me the chance to actually review it, and I want to let you know why I like this phone so much right now in this review. So let's start with the first great thing, the design and build, because just look at it, I think it looks really minimalistic but clean and beautiful. And in terms of size, it's quite nice to see, because here, compared to the Samsung Galaxy 7, not a whole lot taller, not almost any wider, and almost not thicker, considering that the Samsung Galaxy 7 has a 3000 mAh battery, where this one has a 4100 mAh battery, and this is so amazing to see. In terms of build quality, also super solid, and this is what I've already said in my first impressions video, what I like to call premium heft, because it's not the most lightweight one, but it feels just great. Of course, since it is aluminum, and with colder, drier hands, it is a little bit slippery, but it's absolutely normal. What is nice to see, though, that we have, as you can see, the curve towards the sides, which is the one thing that you hold on to. So a curve in the middle wouldn't really help. This is more a thing for big phones, but I definitely like that. It feels quite unique in the hand due to the quite big beveled edges, but I absolutely like the in-hand feel. One-hand use was great. And also the fingerprint reader, because as you can see, this one is super reliable and usually also very fast. As you can see, let's turn on the screen. As you can see, super quick, reliable. I like that. Then we also have, of course, the camera with the LEDs. We have a microphone. We have an IR blaster. Super nice to see. Headphone jack, SD card and SIM card tray. And on the bottom, speaker, microphone, and micro USB. On the right side, in terms of buttons, I definitely like the placement. This is pretty much exactly what I want, especially also with the volume rocker. I would only wish for a little bit more click, but usually it's normally fine, absolutely no problem. We have a notification LED, and as you can see, we have capacitive buttons. In terms of the border, it's not all that bad, I would say, because if we quickly check that, this is still absolutely fine, especially since this is not the most high-end phone, and therefore miniaturization is not the biggest one. But I definitely like the design, especially for the price even more so, and it feels great and then feels super solid, feels extremely premium. And considering that this phone costs way less than $200, this is absolutely almost kind of mind-boggling. Okay, let's talk about the display, and the first thing that I want to always show here is the color and saturation mode, because as you can see here, you can set it to warm, cold, and cool, but I would wish for a granular modification, because as you can only change to those, which is a little bit sad to see. We have a standard mode, which is definitely quite natural, but I prefer the brilliant mode, even though I have to say the first thing about the colors, especially reds and blues, are just too deep. I'm not saying they are oversaturated, they are just too deep and a little bit off, but that didn't really diminish my overall experience, because I still like the colors a lot. You just have to get a little bit used to that they are not super natural. If you want it, you can just go to the standard mode where they look already a little bit nicer, but I liked a little bit more popping colors. White balance was absolutely fine. I set it actually to cold because out of the box it felt a little bit too warm and flat for me. Black levels were okay, but I have to say the IPS glow is just a tad little higher than maybe on the better phones out there. Maximum brightness was not the very best one. I would say sunlight readability is okay, but the display itself gets quite early quite bright, so I only used it at 30%. Brightness with, the sharpness with 1080p at 5 inches is absolutely top notch. The viewing angles are stable enough, so no complaints here. And overall, I definitely have to say it is a very good display. Now, what about the speaker? Cupping it with your hand definitely helps, but I gotta say I'm actually surprised because of the quite compact size. The speaker is actually quite capable. Not the very loudest one, but usually fine enough. And I definitely liked the total sound balance because it was quite warm. Clarity was there and it wasn't weak or something like that, so that is nice to see. What is even nicer to see though is the headphone jack, because judging from the Xiaomi Mi 5S or similar ones, I did not have high expectations, but I was actually kind of blown away because it is noticeably louder and better in terms of overall sound than my Samsung Galaxy S7, and that's kind of my threshold, because if it's as good as the S7, I'm okay. everything below that is not quite okay, and everything above that is good. And this is actually very good because it was noticeably higher, and we have in the settings some options to have a system-wide equalizer, some adjustments to if you have specific Xiaomi phones. And this was so nice to see because I could actually drive a proper earphone to the point where it's almost a little bit almost hurting my ears. And this is something that I just want to because I have reserves. So I'm really happy actually about that. Okay, let's talk about performance. And I would actually like to kind of kill the apps, but as you can see, it never really kills them all. This is weird because they still stay kind of there. Not always, but usually it's a little bit weird to see because now they are again. So, okay, it's a minor thing, but usually it still kills off enough. Now let's try the app launch times. And I actually tried an app called Disco Mark to see how fast they launch, and the values here were quite good, but I won't really consider this to be a part of my reviews because I pretty much don't like what I've seen here because I've tried it and it is actually like over 10 apps faster than my Samsung Galaxy 7 by 2 seconds, but it doesn't really feel like that. It feels definitely snappy, and it's great because even my gestures, as you can see here, of course now, it usually works fine. Believe me, it's a little bit of a hiccup now, but absolutely fine. App launch times are in normal use, considering this is just a kind of affordable phone, so great. And also, scrolling within the browser and the rendering times, absolutely top. I just love what the Snapdragon 625 does, so snappy. And also the scrolling here, as you can see, buttery smooth. Of course, it doesn't feel as smooth as a flagship, but absolutely totally fine enough. And maybe not, of course, not since it's not on AMOLED display, it doesn't feel that smooth. But I just have to say, pretty much completely lag-free. So responsive. Feels so lightweight. And I would say it's so close in terms of performance to something like the Moto Z Play with the same chipset, which I've praised so much, and I will give it the same here. The one thing about the recent apps I'm not so happy, as you can see, there is a little bit of a delay once you hit the button, and sometimes it also gets a little bit jerky. So I'm not the biggest fan of that. So because the usual experience, as you can switch with apps, if you have, for example, gestures, works even better. So usually using my gestures works out fine. One thing that I have to mention about the software, or I mean the performance, I had a complaint in my front impressions video that the RAM management was too aggressive. There is an option if you go into the developer options that is called EMUI RAM management. If you turn that off, it gets way better because then it didn't kill any background apps that I needed to, and it solved kind of my issue by 99%. Gaming performance is absolutely super solid as well for a flagship, for a mid-range, of course. Don't expect the highest frame rates, but absolutely solid 25 to 30 frame rates per second, which is absolutely totally playable at all times. Not really any heating and not really any frame drops. So really capable device. Even my Bluetooth controller worked absolutely fine. And this is what I really like to see. And the great thing is, of course, not just that we can play all the games with a really solid gaming experience, but even better with the battery life, and let's get to that because the battery life is quite impressive. About the charge time, I had to actually double check that because my first charge took almost 3 hours, and this was with my Quick Charge 3.0 charger. Then I used a completely random charger and it took 2 hours and a half. I didn't use the default one because it was an American one, or I didn't have the adapter for that, or at least I didn't see it. So I would say 2.5, which is fine though, since it is, after all, a 4100 mAh battery, and maybe if you have luck and find another charger that is even better, it's even faster. Okay, about the battery itself, 6% for an hour of YouTube, highly impressive, actually the second best mark ever. And the estimates for my battery life, I have to say, keep that with a little bit of a grain of salt, because over the course of 2 days, I had 12 hours on Wi-Fi only. And if I kind of consider what I got normally use, I would say expect about maybe 9 to 10 hours over the course of one day, if you would actually use it on one day, about on data only. In mixed use, maybe 10 to 11, because the drain on mobile data was maybe a little bit higher because I didn't quite get the band, since it's missing band 20, and it was kind of skipping a lot between G4 or 4G. And I mean H plus and H, sorry for the hiccup. And then of course 12 to 13 hours, but you have seen that on the stats, so that's good enough. It is better in terms of battery life compared to the Moto Z Play. And the only phone that I had that was actually better was maybe something like the LG X Power, which is not that a powerful phone, and then maybe the Lenovo P2, but highly impressive. Okay, let's talk about the software now. And I would actually like to spend a lot more time, but this would just take too much because actually the software is really good. In terms of the launcher, you don't really have too much because you can change maybe something like the effects. You don't have a draw, which is not a problem for me. I would just use Nova Launcher, but here you can see what you get, so nothing spectacular. As you can see, I'm using a theme and we have a really nice theming engine, which is definitely nice to see. The theme I'm using, by the way, is called Eureka Pro. I definitely like that. You can adjust a lot of things, but I definitely like this a lot. It looks quite clean. Of course, we have one swipe for the quick settings and the second swipe for all of them. You can rearrange them. Definitely like that. And here you can see the settings get influenced by the theme as well. Of course, we have dual apps in case you don't know what it is. You can run the same app in two instances. We also have something like Second Space where you can kind of use this phone as two phones, which is quite nice to see. I didn't really use that feature, but quite nice after all. Then we have a child mode. I've already talked about Quick Ball. It's a floating ball that gives you some extra options where you can have extra menu things instead of needing the buttons. And like I said, there is so much to talk about, but I don't want to drag this too long to make it too long. Of course, you can change the notification light colors. And I've talked about the sound just real quick. As you can see that here, you can adjust that here in the enhancer with the volume. Yeah, there is so much, and the only thing a little bit janky is the recent apps, but I really like what I got here in terms of software, because especially with the theme, it looks clean, it works, it has a lot of features, and I didn't get even to half of them. There are so many small adjustments, which makes it a really great system. And just so you can see which version I'm running, it is actually the international one. 8.2 MIUI and 6.11.17 beta. And I have to say, the last time on the Xiaomi Mi 5S where I've used MIUI, it wasn't that good. So you can see even quite a short amount of time of a difference, it actually made quite a huge improvement. And I really like what I got here in terms of software. It's fully satisfying. Of course, maybe Nougat could take a while, even though there are already beta tests running. But I'm actually fine with that because the Nougat features that we get, like split screen with dual apps and so on, doesn't really help so much on a 5-inch anyway, so I'm actually fully satisfied. So let's talk about the camera. And you would expect it to be maybe the biggest problem here, but it's actually not, because as you can see here, selfies still quite sharp. Looks okay. There is sometimes, if you zoom in, you notice that it's not all that great, but this is only zoomed in. If you use this phone mostly just for social media and sending your pictures and looking at them and the phone, it looks actually really good, even still sharp in lower light, and absolutely top. If we check here this photo with a flash, looks absolutely clean, absolutely nice. Of course, without not so much. And then of course you will need a lot more steady hands to get a good picture. And maybe those are not the very best ones, but considering the price range, absolutely respectable, absolutely fine. Quite a nice amount of details, picks up still enough light, and is sharp enough. Of course, you need a little bit more steady hands outside. And as you can see here by the next few pictures, it wasn't the best weather. And that's why you can even expect better results with better weather. But I have to say, actually, this is quite nice. If you zoom in, of course, you notice that it is not all that perfect in terms of details. But just looking at them normally zoomed out, even on a monitor, it looks quite good, and even more so on a phone's display. I have to say, colors look nice. The autofocus works actually quite fast and reliable. It had some issues on smaller objects, but I guess this would have been solved if the weather would have been a little bit better, if I would have had a little bit more sun. But I have to say, the outcome is absolutely nice. I definitely like the overall camera experience, which is something very important for me, because I did not really have to bother about much, and I got pretty much a quite high consistent level of good shots. And about the video quality, this is 1080. Maybe doesn't look all that super sharp, but it looks very smooth and still quite okay, with a nice transition from dark to bright. Maybe not super perfectly smooth, but still. And what I liked, actually, what was something quite surprising for me, how smooth the transition of the autofocus was. And it was also very reliable, as you can see here. Even in quite mid-movement, this does an absolutely solid job. I really like that. Of course, maybe not quite optically stabilized and therefore not perfectly stable here. But that's absolutely okay. So besides maybe not being all that super sharp, I gotta say I'm quite happy with the video. And once again, on the phone it looks even better. As you can see here, absolutely, totally fine. Don't need to say anything else. At least that's my opinion. Okay, this is about the camera, what I have to say. Now let's get to the pros and cons, and I will get through all of them quickly, just so I don't forget anything important. So that's like a little bit quick. Impressive build quality. Absolutely. Great one-hand usability, I've talked about it. Very good fingerprint reader, reliable and fast. Fully satisfying display. Sounds maybe a little bit weird. Is it very good? Is it good or something like that? I would say it's really good, which is definitely better than good, maybe even better than very good, because it was fully satisfying. After all, I liked the display. It wasn't super impressive and it wasn't flawless due to the IPS glow, but fully satisfying means quite a lot in my book. A good speaker, absolutely fine. A very good headphone jack, which is nice to see. A very good performance. And this, not just considering it is a mid-range phone, this is in general, even compared to flagships, this is still very good performance. I really like that. Then insane battery life, which is a huge plus. Actually top software, actually not really, it's not really a different feeling just because it's a Chinese UI or so. You get used to it really quickly, and if you have used something like a different launcher with the app drawer, if you don't want it, really, you won't miss out on anything. You would actually get a lot of features that you don't get on more of the Western UIs. Then we have a very good overall camera for this price range and even in general, but not the very best one, but for this price, considering the whole package, which is the next point, it is, in my opinion, flawless total package with a really fantastic value. Now, what's not that great, which is not all that much and not all that important, buttons could be a little bit more clicky, not something really huge because it still gives you enough tactile feedback. Certain colors are too deep. If you use the standard mode, it's actually a lot better, but not really that diminishes anything in terms of quality. It's maybe not the brightest panel, so if you are a lot in sunlight, maybe not perfect, but for me, normal use, every time absolutely fine, and I used it with just 30%, no problems here. Then the default RAM management, which you can change, and that's why it's in brackets, so then it becomes pretty much a non-issue at this point. No band 20, that's a regional thing if it's an issue for you or not. And it has to be imported. That's kind of already the next thing, because for example, you could get it trading Shenzhen, just an example, about 170 euros. Sometimes I've even seen it cheaper, and I have to say, and this is my conclusion, for this price, first of all, you can't go wrong at all, but you can achieve such a great experience, because I actually thought a few times already, if I would have this phone, I think I would actually over the long term ditch my S7, because the camera is not important for me and the performance is so consistent on a great level, and then I have like more than twice the battery life, or almost 3 times the battery life of my S7. I have a very top speaker, I even have the better headphone jack, feels great in the hand, fingerprint reader in a nice location with an super software, so this is actually already mind-bogglingly close in an overall just typical user experience to a flagship. If you don't consider things like the camera, of course there is a bigger difference and the display is just way more impressive on the S7, but just using it normally and considering the price is after all maybe like a third of that, I have to say, not just fully recommended, but it's actually, and I don't like to say this, but so far the best compact phone, at least in that price range and way higher, because for something like that, normally if you have not imported it, you have to pay at least, I don't think double will be good enough. I don't think, because I haven't used something for double the price that comes even close to that. And if you consider any phone in that price range at around, let's say, let's be generous, below 200, you won't get even near that, not even close. Because what do we have here? Honor 5C, Moto G4 Play, Moto G4. No, not even close. And that's where I want to end this, because I'm highly impressed. They did a great job. I could use this as my daily driver without any problems. I kind of actually want it. Of course, the Band 2 is a problem, but not for me so much, because LTE, I only have 21 Mbit usually anyways, and with this one I got 14. Not a huge difference. Reception didn't make such a big difference for me. I've seen the switch between H Plus and H a lot, but didn't really notice any difference. So that's it. Once again, a big thanks to Trading Shenzhen, because I had so much fun reviewing this phone. And you know the drill. You know the rest. Comments, likes, subscription, all that. But don't forget. Have a nice day. Bye.